Please welcome to the stage your Echo Energy Chief Executive, Fiona McCauley.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the Echo Energy Investor event. We're here at the George in the Strand. It's a historic location. I believe that although it was actually built in the reign of George III, it was actually named after the pub landlord, so no connections there. It's lovely to see some familiar faces and some new faces, and I look forward to getting to meet as many of you as possible during the course of the afternoon. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We have two fire exits at the venue, one the door that you entered through, and a second fire exit just behind the screen here, and facilities for ladies and gentlemen will be found at the bottom of the stairs. This afternoon is really for you. It's an event for private investors. It's to meet the team, myself, Will Holland, our CFO, Julian Besser, our VP Exploration, and I'm delighted to say that we've got James, our non-exec chairman, Marco and Stephen White in the audience here today, so I'm sure we'd all like to get around and chat with you. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on what's been going on, what we've been doing in creating the fundamental building blocks of the company, and to show you how we're really poised now to catapult ourselves into the world of market cap 2 or 3 times bigger than that which we are now. So you know, we're just here ready and poised to move ourselves to the next level. Rome, of course, wasn't built in a day. The great thing about Rome, though, is that all those building blocks were put in place, all the foundations were put in place, the planning was put in place, and that's the reason that Rome is still many parts of it standing from those very first buildings, and that's what we really hope to give you with Echo, something that's got those strong foundations, that's been well planned, and that will still be standing as we move forward. Backed by popular demand, we've got the Doctor of the Rocks, who's going to give us a presentation by popular demand on fold and thrust belts. This is the first in our technical presentation series that we're going to be making over the next few months. So Dr. Julian Besser will be giving us that masterclass following on from this presentation. Following the formal part of the afternoon, so these presentations are probably going to take around 40 minutes in total. We'll be here for the rest of the day. There's a buffet that's been laid out at the back of the pub, and obviously we'll have drinks. For those of you that are going on to the sound event, we're just a few minutes walk from the embarkation point, so, and it'll be nice to see some more of you later this evening. The event itself here is due to finish around 5 o'clock, so if you can just sort of bear that in mind as we go forward. Moving on to the slides that we'd like to run through today, and just to remind you about who Echo are. We are an AIM-listed, exploration-led, gas-focused, value-driven E&P that is based in Latin America. We've got a really bold, adventurous growth strategy, and that's underpinned by having 26 million on the balance sheet at the moment. And we must not underestimate what credibility that gives us as a team. We're really being noticed by some of the bigger companies. Household names are actually making incoming calls to us. We've made a real firm, established presence in the Latin American region already. And we have that credibility both through the people and through that balance sheet exercise. So we're really opportunity hungry. It's a high value gas market that we're targeting, and we're taking advantage of that carbon conscious agenda that we as a society are moving towards. As you know, it's been a pretty rapid event cycle, having been launched in April of this year, or relaunched in April of this year, creating that new strategy, bringing together a new board, bringing together a new team, reliant on that fundraise, and the private investor open offer that has created the balance sheet that we have today. As you're aware, we have that market entry point in Bolivia, and we'll talk more about Bolivia in a moment. And we've also been putting into place some of those fundamental building blocks, as I mentioned. So we have new brokers, Hanneman Partner, who are absolutely placed to help us in this acquisitive phase that we find us in at the moment. And our new Nomad, Smith & Williamson, who are able to provide us the support that we need as a team in dealing with the AIM panel and in registering legal requirements. As you will have noticed from some of the press releases that have gone out recently, we had a fantastic response to the tender that we went out for seismic reprocessing on the Bolivian acreage, and I'll come on to that more in a moment. But we were able to award a contract to a very high quality firm in Hanover, who are absolute specialists in the kind of seismic that we have, and we were delighted that that tendering process was very, very commercially driven, and that we had some fantastic bids in. So saving your shareholders money, because we've managed to do that at a much lower cost than we had even budgeted for. So I think that was a great result, and showed that there was a market out there that really wanted to work with us closely. As you know, we've got three fundamental pieces to the company, and that's our 3 Ps: the people, portfolio, and partnerships. And I'm going to leave Will later on to talk to you a little bit more about the partnerships and what they mean to us. But I'd like to move on to one of the first of those three cornerstones of the company, and that's the people. And we've been really developing that team over this last couple of months. So, as you know, I came on board as chief exec. It's 3 months today since I've been on board, and it's been a very, very busy 3 months. Julian is our VP of Exploration. What Julian's been doing is creating those liaisons with the technical supporting companies that we have to put in place. You'll have noticed that we put out an announcement yesterday that we've formed an alliance with Zenith. They're a very good well engineering company. I personally have worked with a number of the people who form that group, and they actually have operator status, and with them linked alongside us, that actually gives us operator status. So that's really key and fundamental to make sure that we have the whole breadth of knowledge base within ECHO without actually going to the expense of having these people on the payroll. They're there, we can use them in a call-off contract situation, and they can form that drilling department for us for the foreseeable future. But of course we need somebody to lead that, and associated with that announcement was the announcement of appointment of a regional drilling manager. Daniele Poligano has come to us. He's been running the Badile project out in Italy, and he's going to be based in Santa Cruz in the first instance, in this highly critical phase of pre-planning. You don't just go out to Bolivia and drill a well. You need to think about the permitting, we need to think about the access, we need to think about how we actually put all of the contracts into play, and we need to do those in a really tax efficient manner as well. So we need to make sure that those relationships are developed in country, and that every contract we sign is signed in an appropriate manner to enable us to gain from cost recovery at a later date. Importantly, last month we also announced that our country representative Andres Brockman is going to be in place. He's going to be joining us on the 1st of November, although as you can imagine he's already in quite regular contact with us, so just in this phase of selecting the correct office location and ancillary staff in the region. Andres is a fantastic character. He's been number 2 in Petrobras for a number of years. He is a Bolivian national, and that's really key. He has all of those relationships in country that you would expect. He knows all of the members of the regulatory bodies. He's been sitting on the board of the Hydrocarbon Advisory Committee. So, you know, he brings us all of those day-to-day relationships that are going to be so key to actually get this project up and running. I know a number of you have been to a couple of our events, so I probably won't spend as much time on some of these slides as I have done in the past. But really, why LATAM gas? Why have we made this the focus of the Eco Energy story? Well, it's really very simple. Latin America is one of the biggest end users of gas for power and for fuel for cars, and for domestic consumption that there is. Their growth in the utilisation of gas is growing at something like 3% per annum, so it's a really, really high growth rate. There's a number of gas producing basins and belts within Latin America, and you know, if you can actually have your production out of one of those gas producing belts, you can be assured that you can sell that gas very, very quickly, provided that you're close to existing infrastructure to reduce your cost base. So Bolivia exports something like 77% of its gas, mainly via two long-term gas sales contracts, one into Argentina and the other into Brazil. But very recently they've just signed a further contract to build a pipeline into Paraguay, and any additional gas that is surplus to those gas contracts is going to go into that vein. So we're looking at Latin America because not only is it a key producer, but it's a key user, and having both of those pieces put together, it is critical for us. And for some parts of the continent, for example in Argentina, where they're net importers, actually being able to take gas directly from the pipeline, and we'll talk about this more later, it is financially beneficial for them as well. Bolivia has been our first foothold into the Latin American gas story. Natural gas actually contributes to 43% of their GDP, so you know it is the biggest contributor by far to the wealth of the nation, and it's been the thing that has actually pulled them out of poverty. So the government is massively incentivized to ensure that story keeps on going. They've had a lack of investment in exploration over the last few years, where I don't have a pointer, I'm afraid, that will work on here, where exploration has been neglected. Then as high commodity prices came in, so pre the oil and gas crash, we had an increase in the exploration. That's what created their resource base that enabled them to formulate these long-term gas sales projects. But that's now declined, so people have not been putting the money into the ground to actually replace those resources that are being used and that are needed to actually supply these contracts. So right now, today, the government is putting out new incentives to encourage drilling, to increase that resource base, and for us that's a fantastic opportunity. One, they want to talk to us, and even since the signing of the evaluation agreements that we already have in place, they're inbound to us at the moment. They are trying to persuade us to look at more and more bits of acreage. So they're coming to us. This isn't us having to run after them anymore. They've seen us as a serious player, and they want us to come in and talk to them about other opportunities. And what about the cornerstone acreage that we have the availability to access? As you know, we have the Huaco and Surround block, which is 100% owned by Cruz Petrol at the moment, in which we have an agreement to take 80% in operatorship, should we wish to do so, at the end of the evaluation phase. And in order to do that, we need to complete our seismic reprocessing. That's absolutely on track. we're going to have the first results on the time-migrated seismic volumes, which I'm sure Julian will talk to us about a little bit more towards the end of this year. That will then get transposed into a depth migrated. That means that we can actually tell what depth things are at. We can then decide whether we've de-risked this prospect sufficiently to go ahead with drilling it. As I've said before, we're not just in Mayfair here. We are absolutely in the Park Lane. To the west and east of us, we have acreage that's dominated by Shell and by Repsol. Repsol are currently drilling a well. Shell are about to spud a well. Many of the discoveries in this area are up to 6 TCF. That is massive, absolutely massive, because you have high recovery factors in these rocks, which means that you almost nothing is lost. So we go from a high gas in place to a very high recovery factor to give us these massive volumes, and you're close to infrastructure. So on here, just to give you an idea, yes, we're in a very hilly area. There is a lot of forest cover, but actually we are in an area where we've already got infrastructure in place. We're not very far from the main export gas line to Brazil and to Argentina. There are local pipelines that already cross the block. There are roadways that already cross the block. There are roadways actually to a former drilling pad that sit within the block. So this is not something where we're going to have to spend many millions just on creating access routes. Those things are already available. And it's all those things that are put together that made this such an attractive proposition for us. Again, I'm not going to steal any of Julian's thunder in talking about the reservoirs, but just to put something in scale here, to the right-hand side of this image, that's a reservoir thickness that one could envisage having in the region. There are several fields where we've got 600 metres of the main reservoir target, and if you just look at that in comparison to the Shard and the Gherkin, all places that I think you've visited on other investor events, then you know that reservoir itself dwarfs those facilities. So at that point, I'd like to hand over to Will. Will's going to talk to you a little bit more about the export markets that we might expect to see from Bolivia. And the first of those that we're going to talk about is the export market to Argentina. So thank you.
A couple of things. To start off with, I can talk a little bit about where we would expect to export any gas produced from a discovery on the rear side of the Huayco blocks. If you look to this graph on our right, the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here, you'll see the sort of three main sources of uses or demand for gas in the country at the moment, coming out of Bolivia. So the small section at the bottom is our domestic consumption, and then we've got these two main contracts that Shane was talking about before. Current production in Bolivia is just under 19 million cubic meters per year. So those with good eyes will see, I'll just remove this thing so I can talk. We'll see that they're below what they need at the moment. So there is a deficit of gas supply in the country. So that's really driving the Bolivian government to incentivize people to drill and explore for gas in Bolivia. Now Argentina is a very, very significant part of that demand. And if you look at the pie chart at the top, this shows the uses of power generation for Argentina. So 50% of Argentina's power comes from gas. Of that 50%, 52% comes from Bolivia. So Bolivia is a very, very important source of power for Argentina as a whole. As you see on the map here, we've got this main trunk line that comes out of the south of Bolivia into the network of Argentina. This is currently being expanded. It currently currently has a capacity of 20, it's going up to 27, so it's about a 35% increase in capacity. So Bolivia are a very important source of gas for Argentina. You will notice also within Argentina there's quite an extensive network of existing pipelines, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but that's a very important point. They have excellent distribution within the areas of demand within the country, including Buenos Aires and the sort of Mendoza region and further down to the south. Okay, so moving on. What is it about Argentina? I mean, a lot of people will have read about Argentina. It's come out of a period of a fairly dark period for them. When you go and talk to local Argentinians, a lot of them are slightly embarrassed about the 12 years before the arrival of the new President Macri, who you can see in this picture here, talking to our Chancellor very recently, in fact only in August. He has changed the business environment within Argentina very rapidly. He only came to power in December of 2015, and already inflation has dropped significantly. The GDP is now growing. He's very investor friendly. He's looking to build on the economy and encouraging investment into Argentina. Britain as a country is very welcome there now, and we find this a very interesting place to look at. There are lots and lots of opportunities in Argentina. We said right from the beginning when ECHO was relaunched that we were Latin American focused, and we had, as Fiona has said in a number of her presentations, an ABC strategy, Argentina, Bolivia and Colombia. So Argentina has been a core focus for us. Let's try and quantify it a little bit for you. The bottom left-hand chart, this is from the BP Statistical Review for 2017. These are the proven reserves within Argentina at the moment. 12.4 TCF of gas. That's almost double the amount of gas that we have in the UK. So that's the Southern Gas Basin and the Central North Sea and the other pockets around the country. So almost double the amount of gas reserves. About the same amount of oil. So with the UK, we've got 2.5 billion barrels, and they've got 2.4. But this is a very underexplored area of the world. It's been overlooked. People have been ignoring the country because of the previous regime, haven't been investing in the country. The best way of showing that is actually this graph on the bottom right. Here you see at one point, not very long ago, they were a net exporter. Since 2008-9, they've been a net importer of gas. This has probably been because they've had a lack of investment in the sector, so their production has declined. Since 2006, production of gas in Argentina has dropped by 25%, whilst demand has increased. Hence, we've got this deficit. Macri is very keen to encourage foreign direct investment into Argentina. And it's a very opportunity-rich environment. There are plenty of companies there. A lot of them that you wouldn't have heard of because they're private companies. And these companies are constrained through lack of capital. They're constrained often through they don't have international expertise because there's been a bit of they do, but they don't have as much as they could have. So they're very welcoming to companies like ECHO when we go and talk to people. So I'll come back to a few of these points later on as I progress. What I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about is business development. I mean, we can't tell you what we're doing at the moment. We're regulated by the London Stock Exchange. There are AIM rules which govern what we can and can't say. And actually, from a commercial standpoint and from a negotiating standpoint, we wouldn't want to be telling people what we're doing until we've actually closed it anyway, because it would weaken our negotiating position. But we thought it would be a good idea to just explain the process that we have to go through. We recognise that everyone's probably sitting here waiting for us to announce the deal that we're about to do. We're not announcing any deals at the moment. That doesn't mean we're not doing any. We're actually looking at a tremendous amount. So what I want to do is just talk about what that process is and how that process works. And the factors that we have to work under. But to do that, let's go back to one of our key pillars, which is the partnerships. Now, we've talked about Plus Patrol and YPFB in the past, who are our partners in Bolivia. Fiona mentioned in her presentation Zenith Energy, recent partnership, excellent company. We've just attached a well management division to Echo on a call-out basis. We have that expertise which we can call on at any time. Very, very important for us when we are planning, well planning in Bolivia, but also when we're looking at other opportunities and we want to assess the well management risk, the drilling risk, understand what does it take to actually drill in particular parts of the world. Zenith have got a lot of experience in Latin America, which is really vital for us. The other two companies, Fiona also mentioned Hannam Partners. Hannam Partners are a specialist resources M&A shop. You may not have heard of them, but if you do a bit of searching, you'll see they've been involved in a lot of very innovative deals where they've helped companies acquire assets in imaginative ways. So we've been working very closely with that team over the past few months, and they provide excellent regional knowledge as well, which is also a very important part. And then the Smith & Williamson. Smith & Williamson are our nominated advisor. As I said, we are listed on AIM. We're a London Stock Exchange company, and we have to operate within the rules of AIM. And Smith & Williamson provide us the advice that we need to ensure that we are providing, we're operating within those constraints. And just as something to keep in the back of your mind whilst we're talking about the process on the next slide, the overriding principle of AIM is to ensure that the market has enough information and knowledge that they need to make an informed decision about the value of the stock. That's fundamentally what they're trying to do. So the AIM regulations are there to ensure you as an investor are given all the information that you require in a manner where everyone receives the information at the same time, so it's a level playing field, and you can make an informed decision about whether to buy, hold, or sell a stock. That's the overriding principle. Smith & Williamson provide us with, they're like our internal legal compliance department that we use that say, okay, you need to behave in this manner, in a way that's fair for everyone and operates within the rules of AIM. So with that in mind, let's talk about the deal life cycle. This is something which we haven't been able to put out any press releases about because we can't talk about it. As I said, you don't want to tell everyone about deals that you're doing because it weakens your strategic advantage. However, we have a very strict process of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and a way to ensure that what the deals that we do are value accretive and will really enhance shareholder value, and you get the type of returns that you're looking for. Latin America, huge amount of opportunities there. That's great in one respect, but in another respect, actually, it can be very distracting because you've got so many opportunities that come over your desk, and you've got to make sure that you're choosing the right one. So what are the right deals to look at? And so we predefine the criteria that we're looking for. And then we categorize them. There are deals that actually we just wouldn't do because, for whatever reason. There are deals that we like, but they don't quite fit the strategy. And then there are deals that we think are ideal for us. And there's a few of them. So we go through that high level of identifying, screening, bracketing, working with our advisors on which one should we be chasing. And then you go, okay, well, let's have a look at these. Do they look like good opportunities? First important question, is there a deal there? Do you have a willing seller? Will it provide the sort of value that we're looking for from a shareholder perspective? We don't want to do a deal which is a bit muted. It doesn't, also, maybe it's very difficult to finance it, or it doesn't fit the core competencies of us as a team. So it's identifying and categorizing deals on that basis. You then go and start talking to people, and this has all got a timeline here. So we've got T0 months to potentially 4 or 5 months here. That's very, very generic. It can vary from that, but it's just to give you a bit of an idea. So after you've done the initial screening, you can go to the next level. And there might be a fundamental flaw, so one might drop away. Or you might put it on the back burner and say we can come back to that at a later date, but there's something about it that maybe doesn't quite work. You then go and start talking to them, and you start saying, okay, how can you work a deal here? You take the data that they give you, a lot of it at face value, you accept it, and you see, does this provide us with what we're looking for? Does this provide us with the value that our shareholders expect? We're fundamentally technically driven, but the decisions that we make are all about value. Does it create value for our shareholders? So we're looking at things from a, yes, we want to take technical risk, because if you don't take technical risk, you don't get that uptick. So we want to see something where we see the value, we like the technical opportunity, and then we see, well, we can fund that, we can finance it, and then if it succeeds, it will result in a significant value uplift. So you take those considerations, you model it, you say, okay, that value looks good, the value accretion is good, you agree a deal, and then you go into the detailed diligence, which can take some time, of making sure that what you've been told and the representations that have been made to you by the counterparty are actually sustainable. So we'll actually do our own diligence, we'll actually do our own technical work to make sure that what we've been told is actually correct. And at this point, we might find that actually it doesn't work, doesn't stack up anymore, because we were told something that isn't actually strictly correct. And then when you model it yourself, the value drops away, and you say, actually, this doesn't work for us anymore. So you don't just work one deal, you're working several deals in different phases along here as you progress them. And then hopefully you get to a point where you've got a binding agreement, you sign it, and you announce it. Now, the announcing bit's the interesting part. Sometimes you don't announce right at the very end once you've got everything compiled. Sometimes there are reasons that you maybe need to announce beforehand. AIM, hello. The requirements of AIM is once you have a binding commitment, you have to announce. Or if there is a possibility that the deal that you're doing is going to get leaked into the marketplace because you can't control the flow of data. Maybe during the diligence phase, there's some reason that you're concerned that it might leak, then you have to announce it then. If that happens and you haven't got all of the information that you need to present to your investors for them to formulate an informed decision about the value of the stock will get suspended. Now, it'll be suspended to the point where you can provide the market with all the information. Now, often that's a CPR, Competent Persons Report, or a legal opinion about the validity of the title of the asset, or whatever it might be. And this is a very prescriptive process that AIM lays out. So if you have to announce, and you are suspended, you are suspended to the point where you can release this information, and then you're trading again. So there's always a possibility that that we might have to announce during one of these processes. If that's the case, and we are suspended, it's not a bad thing at all. It just means we haven't collated all the information, and that would follow a few weeks later on. This again is the requirements of AIM to ensure that everybody has, from a trading standpoint, is on the level playing field, and there's not somebody who has inside information that's dealing ahead of you. So it's for your own protection. I think that's it. I've talked quite a lot about that. I'm sorry if I've sent anyone to sleep. There's a lot more details. If you want to talk more about it, I'm happy to talk more about it. But it can be a bit of a it's a very, very technical process. That actually brings my side of the presentation to an end. So on that, I will hand you back to Fiona.
So we didn't just have one masterclass today, we've had two masterclasses, which hopefully has been informative for you all. So that brings us on really to news flow. Where are we? What is the news flow that you as private investors should expect? Well, obviously we have the news flow as it relates to Huaco, to Rio Salado, those Bolivian assets. We may well add to that Bolivian portfolio. We don't know yet. We're evaluating a number of options there. But that news flow is going to, we have a very clear, defined pathway between now, making the decision whether we're going to progress to drilling that well, and then the life cycle to drilling that well, which would follow on after that. But alongside that, as Will said, we're evaluating a whole bunch of other potential opportunities. And so what you should be thinking about is just building this portfolio. I've said this a couple of times, really, the foundation of the company is to build a good value accretive portfolio. So over the next few months, you should expect to see other assets sitting within that portfolio. And each of those will have a life cycle and a news flow of its own. So the objective here is to have a multi-layered series of news flow that you can expect over the next 6 to 12 months. We show it here as a hopper. We're looking at Huaco and Rio Salado at the base of that hopper, and Bolivia and beyond topping up the hopper. So that really is where we are today. Just to finalise this part of the presentation before we go on to Julian's technical presentation, what is it that Echo add? What are we doing? Well, we believe that we're able to identify these opportunities. It's a really counter-cyclical period of time at the moment. That there are opportunities out there that have been hidden away, have been lost, that maybe haven't sort of raised up to the surface. Will said himself that there are opportunities out there that are in small private companies that may not have had the ability to access a wider market. We can access that acreage. We can use our expertise and the expertise of the strategic partnerships that we're building alongside us. We are technically driven, we're technically led. Every project is required to be technically robust. That is key and fundamental for us. We're quite a technical exec team between us, and we think that's important alongside those partnerships. And the objective at the end of the day for everybody is to develop and monetize those assets. So that is the pathway that we will tread. And we're very lucky to have our cornerstone investors, Greenbury, who have been able to help us raise capital. Maybe we'll need to raise more capital in the future, but we feel well placed to do that. So I'm going to move on now. Julian is going to give us his presentation, so may I hand over to him? Thank you.
And then the last thing you want to hear is a technical presentation, and I can see everyone wants to have some drink and catch up with old friends and talk to us. But I do think this is important. I do think it's important for you as investors to really understand what you're investing in. So for me, that's a key point. We are, as Fiona said, a very technically oriented team. The E&P business is technical. The opportunities are technical. If we can't find oil in the ground, there's nothing that Will can do as CFO to make it any better. So we need those technical cornerstones. If you look at what we've done in Bolivia, we're a very small company, but we have had a disruptive effect. The industry in Bolivia has been very consolidated, no new entrants. The last new entrant was actually Gazprom a few years ago, and we've come along. And if you go to Bolivia, you'll see Fiona is in the newspaper quite a lot. You'll see her photo everywhere. There is a lot of news around us in Bolivia, and that's very important because it creates opportunities for us with the NOC, etc. Now, what I want to do is just give you a brief overview of how Huaco formed, how the block formed geologically. So pretend that you're members of my exploration team. We're building opportunities, so we'll be expanding our exploration team. So if you like what you see, drop me an email. Right. Next slide, please. So to be an exploration geologist, it's really important to to look at the field scale, at the kilometre scale, but also the macro scale, and I'm talking the many thousands of kilometres. So here's our block, Huaco and Rio Salado. There's Santa Cruz, you see Bolivia sitting there. And the structures that we see in Huaco are all related to the formation of the Andes. So I'm going to explain to you how the Andes formed, and then we'll on this side of South America, and then we'll see what the impact was on Huaco. And because of the structures that form through this process, we need to really interpret the seismic, we need to reprocess it, because you'll see that the structures are very complex. You look at this map and you can see, I really love this map actually, because it really shows all the environments in South America. But you can see the Andes, a 7,000 kilometre chain of mountains that runs the whole length of South America. And it actually follows into Antarctica here. Now the formation of the Andes is due to two plates. So you've got the South American plate moving at about 2.5 centimetres a year, which itself is quite a lot. And then you've got this plate of what we call oceanic crust, so that's quite dense iron-rich rock, really moving at a very fast rate at 8 centimetres a year. So these two plates are crashing together. This is a cross-section here, so let's take a cross-section through there. And what happens when oceanic crust collides with lighter continental crust is, because it's denser, it actually drops down, and this is what we call subduction. So it's moving down below the continental crust at around 8 centimetres a year. And what that does is all the rocks are in the Pacific Ocean, those actually get pushed up like that. So as this moves down, rocks get pushed up, and that forms the Andes. Also, as oceanic crust subducts below the continental crust, there's a lot of water coming down here. This melts, the water makes the molten rock buoyant, and you get volcanoes forming. And you'll know, along through the Andes, there are a number of volcanoes, and there's a very famous volcano in Chile that erupted only a couple of years ago, actually in 2015, the big ash cloud right across South America. So that's what's happening on this side. As you can see in Bolivia, the Andes actually has a big kink, and that's known as the Bolivian orocline. How that formed is, you've got this plate is breaking up, and you've got an old bit of rock here surrounded by younger rock, which is actually moving at a faster rate, which caused a rotation, and the rotation in the Andes there. Okay, so that's how the Andes formed. We like to think this is Aconcagua, so this is the highest point in the Andes, which is over 6, almost 7 kilometres high on the border between Argentina and Chile. So what I'd like to do now, you guys now really understand this side. Let's have a look what's happening here in Bolivia. So you still with me?
Yep.
Yeah. I haven't put any of you to sleep in the back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Next slide, please. Okay, now this is a video. So what we're doing is you're looking from north to south. This is the Andes. This is Bolivia. And in geology, we can't actually go to the mountains and see them moving because they're very slow in geological time. So we do lab work. So what we do is we make these sandbox models that are sand and resin, and put the same forces on the sand as are in the Earth crust, and everything's proportional, and you can see what's happening. So if we start the video, So this is our IT. So this is the Andes forming. Can we run? Yeah, okay, it's running. Actually, it's like the plate moving underneath it. Okay, so these are the rocks that were laid down in Bolivia. The oldest rocks are laid down first, so these are older. Remember this, because there's going to be a test at the end, because you're going to tell me where to drill. And these are the younger rocks. So here you see the Andes coming up. There's a lot of compression, and you're forming these structures. Can you see these structures forming? Yeah. You can see these what we call faults. So suddenly the rocks break, and you get older rock over younger rock. And what's important is oil migrates up dip. So if you've got these structures, you've got places where oil and gas can form. So this is what's actually happening in Bolivia. So, and Huaco would be any one of these structures. And you can see some of the structures actually override each other, and we call those piggyback structures. Okay. So that gives you an overview of how these structures form. Can we move to the next slide? And the amount of what happens is, as these move over, everything shortens up. And you can actually shorten the Earth's crust. In Bolivia, the Earth's crust is actually shortened by about 70 kilometers. So now we're zooming into Huaco. And this is what we call one of these thrusts forming, and they've got very distinctive geometries. They always start typically in a shale, and then suddenly there's a dislocation and it moves up. And we call this bit the hanging wall, and this bit the footwall. Next slide, please. And again. So here you see the hanging wall. It's moved now along that thrust, and we form this structure, this anticlinal structure. That's excellent because our reservoir here is orange, so this is the Huaman Pampa, that big thick section that Fiona was showing you before. And you've also got the Los Monos, which is a very good source rock as well. So it's feeding into the structure here. Next slide, please. And again, as you get more compression, more structures. Now what you find in Bolivia, the exploration has moved gradually from east to west, and these shallow structures, can you remember what this side of the fault was called? It was the hanging wall. Hanging walls in very shallow structures tend to fail, and you can see here very well because all the oil and gas can migrate to surface and is lost. So if you were to drill this structure here, yeah, you're going to find nothing because it's all gone. So where the big prize is these much deeper footwall structures that have no connection to surface. There'll probably be high pressure and large accumulations of oil and gas. And those wells that Fiona told you about earlier are all testing these footwall structures. And that's what we want to do in Huaco as well. Next slide, please.
Julian, what's trapping the gas?
What's trapping the gas? Well, if you look at the sedimentary column, there will be this is a seal here, and these tend to seal as well. So what we do know is, if you look at Kuiper Pendy and the production history of Kuiper Pendy, each one of these acts as an individual segment. So there's a seal here and a seal here, which keeps the oil and gas within the segment. But along the segment, there's a lot of communication. So for kilometres, wells could talk to each other. And that's what makes these wells so productive, because you don't need to drill a well every kilometre. You could drill a well every 7, 8, 9 kilometres, and your recovery will be very, very good. Does that answer your question? Any more questions? No, you're still with me?
Yep.
Next slide. We're almost there. Almost there. So here, this is bringing everything together. So here you see Wacko. Here are the structures here. Wacko, there were several very early wells drilled on the shallow structures. Those found a small amount of non-commercial gas. Once you know the geology, you understand why those wells failed. You're very good geologists now, so you can see the surface expression of these thrusts. So each of these mountains is a big thrusted surface. So when you look at mountain belts now, you'll be able to identify thrusts. And then what you see here is, this is Tarija. These are vineyards. So it's some very nice Bolivian wine. And you actually see, where you see the mountains and it's very, very flat, that's the thrusts coming over the flat lying rock. So you can actually see the beginning of the thrust belt there. So quite something special to see. Next slide. Right, now you need to do some work, I'm afraid, before you're allowed any more wine and beer. Now, this is a photograph of the reservoir Paman Pampa from a place called Sammy Hegab. Now, Sammy Hegab is about 3 hours southwest of Santa Cruz driving. Sammy Hegab is very famous because almost 50 years ago, Che Guevara was killed by the Bolivian army. It's Sammy Hegab, so you might see it in the news quite a lot at the moment. Now, what do you see here? Can anyone? You see an outcrop.
Hanging wall.
Yeah, so you see the dip of the beds here. You see the dip of the beds that way. So the beds are going that way. The beds are going that way there. Something is happening. So what you're seeing is one of these thrusts. So this is its surface, but what we would be looking for is something will be much, much larger, about 4 to 6 kilometers below the surface. But what I love about this is this clearly shows you what we're looking for. Now, those of you who were back at the event, I think, in June, we talked about the importance of fractures in these rocks. And you can see around here where the rock's broken up. So that's a zone of fracturing. Now, I'm going to give you 3 options, and I want you guys and girls to put your hands up and tell me if that's where you would drill, okay? So we've reprocessed our seismic. We've reprocessed it with a very good company, so we've got a very good section here. We can see the rocks, and we've got an option to drill here. Now, who would drill there? Nobody? Okay. Yeah, we got one taker. We've got an option to drill here. Who would drill? Who would drill there? We've got a few takers. That's not bad. I want you to drill right here. Any takers for that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, why would you drill there?
It's always safe.
High point.
Excellent. It's a high point, oil and gas migrate up dip, big tick. It's right in the area where all the fractures are, a big tick. So if you want to email me, and you want to join the exploration team, that's good. But why we need to spend the time reprocessing the seismic is you can see geographically there's not much distance. So you really need to place your well in the right place, because even if you go half a kilometre in the subsurface this way, your well is going to produce much, much less. You're going to get a very poor producer here. The producer here won't be so bad, but you'll get a very good producer here. So that's why we're spending all this upfront time reprocessing the seismic and doing all that detailed work. Next slide, please. So that's just putting it all together, and that's a really good picture of what we're going for in Bolivia. So Thanks for staying the course with me. Thank you.
Be announced. Anyway, thank you all for listening to the various presentations. I would say we'd have Q&A now, but I know a lot of people would like to have a drink, so instead I think we will mingle, and please feel free to come and ask us whatever questions you would like to do. As you know, we can't comment on share price, we can't comment on anything that's not in the public domain, but feel free to ask us anything and we will answer it in the best way that we possibly can. So thank you once again.
Otherwise we wouldn't be doing it.
Pretty much underwritten, David.